And we are live. Welcome to my new YouTube channel. On this channel there'll be a variety of different topics, debates, and obviously output from myself, mainly around the world of boxing and a little bit of non-league football thrown in for you football fans. Today I want to talk about obviously tonight's boxing, two massive cards happening here in the UK. Obviously Frank Warren's show, which is Warrington Frampton, and obviously Eddie Hearn's matchroom boxing with their Derek Chisora and Whyte fight, the brawl to settle it all 2. So yeah, I mean obviously it's a big night of boxing. I for one are absolutely psyched about it. Hangover or not, I'll definitely be cracking open a few beers and watching the fights tonight. And I just wanted to talk about really a little bit about both cards, obviously pros and cons of both, maybe a few predictions as well. But I still can't make up which card I'm going to get, to be honest. I'll probably end up getting both. I think both cards, like I say, have their pros and cons. So let's start with Eddie Hearn's the brawl to settle it all. Whyte versus Derek Chisora. Obviously this is happening at the O2 tonight. I believe coverage is on from 6 on Sky Sports box office. Looking at the undercard, I'll be honest with you, I think it's a bit thin. Particularly only interested really in the David Price Tom Little fight. But like I say, you know, it's on from 6. I think the first fight is Ryan Walsh versus Reece Bellotti. Obviously Bellotti dropping a defeat earlier on in his career, coming up against a really experienced Ryan Walsh for the British Featherweight Championship. I for one, not really that much interest in this fight. Ryan Walsh obviously has a lot of miles on the clock. Reece Bellotti consider himself some type of puncher. I think this has 12 rounds written all over it, as do most featherweight fights. But on this one, I'm going to go for the younger man, Reece Bellotti, to outpoint Ryan Walsh over 12 rounds. Obviously, the following fight on from that is the one I'm looking forward to. Obviously, David Price versus Tom Little. I know a lot about Tom Little. I've seen him live a few times. Obviously, a big fella, 6'5", 6'6", comes from that travelling background. A bit of a feather duster in terms of punching power. Doesn't seem to stop a lot of his opponents in the fights he has won. The fights he has won have albeit against journeymen, the odd Hungarian, etc. And Tom Little's turned into a journeyman, especially over his last 4 fights. Obviously, he went out to Croatia and got stopped by Tom Hrgović. Obviously, Hrgović is one of the shining lights in terms of prospects in the heavyweight division. Tom did all right. I thought he jabbed well. He used his size and his reach advantage in the early rounds, but you know, as expected, Hrgović caught up with him and obviously stopped him in the middle rounds. I believe he was using some sort of injury, maybe as an excuse. Obviously, he was in with Daniel Dubois recently as well. Dubois stopping him again in the middle rounds. I don't particularly think Tom was in the best shape of his career for that fight, and that, like all good boxers, he's saying that this one's going to be different. So with Tom Little, obviously, yeah, I mean, he's up against Big David Price tonight, somebody who, in my opinion, is a complete flawed fighter. Obviously, remember David Price coming up through the ranks earlier on his career with Frank and obviously now Kelly Maloney, knocking out everybody. You know, obviously he was British, European champion, and he hasn't been the same since the Tony Thompson defeat. The worst thing he ever did was rematch Thompson, and obviously that didn't end well. Following on from there, obviously knockout defeats to Erkan Tepe, Christian Hammer, and obviously more recently Povetkin and Peter Milas, I believe it was as well. I may be wrong, but like I say, he's lost 2 out of his last 3, and this has all got to do with redemption here for David Price. Prediction, I'm actually going to go with a bit of an upset here. I'm going to go for Tom Little to stop David Price within 6. I understand it's only scheduled for 8. I just think David Price, although he has that experience of fighting on these big matchroom cards on pay-per-view, I just think he's a complete shot fighter nowadays. It's a shame, he's a lovely bloke. Obviously, he carries a lot of power in that right hand. Tom Little's relatively durable. If Tom Little can take the power early on, I believe that David Price will gas. And Tom, although he hasn't particularly got a wide array of sort of punching power, he does put his combinations together quite well. And I can see David Price probably quitting on his stool in 6, which should be the end of the David Price saga. I think this has the hallmarks to be fight of the night. I don't think there'll be much of a feeling out process. Both guys need a win. A loss for either will surely obviously keep them at domestic level for the rest of their careers. So yeah, I'm going to go with Tom Little on that one. Following on from that, we have Carlos Takam up against Senad Gashi. Gashi was actually supposed to be basically the White Rhino, Dave Allen's opponent for the Newcastle show. But he pulled out. Gashi, decent record on paper. He can punch, obviously stopping the majority of his opponents. Up against the Carlos Takam, who obviously suffered that heavy knockout defeat at the hands of Derek Chisora in his last fight. How much does Takam have left? It remains to be seen, but he should have little or no problem disposing of Mr. Gashi. I'd expect that to be over within 3. So we're going to go with Carlos Takam by knockout in that one. Next fight on the card, Christopher Rosales versus Charlie Edwards. Obviously, big step up for Charlie Edwards, fighting for the WBC World Flyweight Championship. Another one that has 12 rounds written absolutely all over it. These light guys, very, very rarely you're going to see a stoppage. If I'm being honest, I don't know a lot about Rosales. Looking at his record, I'd expect him to beat Charlie Edwards. I find Charlie Edwards quite one-dimensional as a fighter. Not vast power, limited head movement. But I'm going to go for Christopher Rosales to win on the points. Going on to the core main event, the sort of head of the undercard, if you will. Joshua Buatsi in against Reynold Quinlan. Obviously, Mr. Quinlan was stopped by Chris Eubank Jr. a few years ago for the IBO title. Didn't show much at all in terms of durability or heart. I fully anticipate Joshua Buatsi to stop Reynold Quinlan within 4. Buatsi, obviously a work in progress. And this is actually over 10 3-minute rounds. I believe this is the first time that Buatsi's fighting over 10. If I'm wrong, please correct me. And this will be for the WBA International Light Heavyweight Championship. So I'm going to go for Joshua Buatsi to stop Reynold Quinlan in the first 4 rounds. Now on to the main event. I'm absolutely psyched for this one. Very much looking forward to it. It's been an interesting build-up. It's been relatively low-key compared to obviously last time out. There's been no tables thrown. There's been no fighting that the gloves are off. There's been no threats. It's been relatively low key, and they've tried to sell the fight on merit, which I think's right. Obviously, Derek Chisora coming into this fight at the minute with a record of 29 wins, 8 losses, and no draws. Obviously, Dillian Whyte with his only career defeat, obviously coming to the hands of Anthony Joshua. Whyte now obviously 24-1. Looking at resumes, I believe that Dillian Whyte's got the stronger resume. Obviously with wins over Joseph Parker, Lucas Brown, Robert Hellenius. Obviously he beat Chisora last time out as well. Although I actually had Chisora winning that fight by 1 point. Obviously prior to the Chisora fight, obviously stopped by Anthony Joshua. Which is, it's no disgrace at all. But other than those names, not much to sort of really shout home about on Dillian Whyte's record. In terms of Derek Chisora, or War Chisora, as he's now known as. Some names of note on his record. Obviously, he had that fantastic win against Carlos Takam last time out. Also obviously wins in the past over the likes of your Kevin Johnsons, your Malik Scotts, your Edmund Gerbers. Not much to really shout out about. I mean, he's had a long career, but in terms of quality names on that resume, I'm struggling. I know he beat a kind of absolute shot-worn Danny Williams back in 2010 for the British heavyweight title. Obviously stopped by Tyson Fury on that Billy Joe Saunders, Chris Eubank card a few years ago as well. He's fought for a world title. Obviously, he was beat by Vitaly Klitschko and obviously stopped by David Haye. Tyson Fury got a stoppage also, but I believe he retired on his stool. Obviously lost to Kubrat Pulev as well, and Ajit Kabiel. I mean, it's a strange main event, really. I mean, if you've got somebody going into it, I mean, these guys between them have 9 defeats. I mean, how this is... It's a masterstroke by Matchroom, how they managed to market this into a pay-per-view card. So prediction time. Looking at both fighters, I think that Derek Chisora, albeit at the tender age of 34, I think Derek's actually an improving fighter. I think linking up with David Haye was a stroke of genius, and obviously getting back together with Don Charles. So I think we're going to see the best Derek Chisora of his career tonight. He looks in great shape. He's obviously bringing David Haye on board. Has clearly paid dividends in camp. Dillian Whyte this week seems a bit agitated to me. I thought Chisora looked a lot better on the scales physically. I think from a mental perspective, both guys are obviously very mentally strong. But I just have a feeling that Derek Chisora is going to get the job done tonight on points. I can't really see either guy knocking the other out. I rewatched the first fight last night, and some guys they were trading heavy leather. Particularly some of the shots that Dillian Whyte took from Chisora was absolute madness. So to confirm, I'm going to go for a Derek Chisora win on points, in albeit a bit of an upset. I believe you can get 4-1 with numerous UK bookmakers on this fight. I think, from a game plan perspective, I can see Dillian coming out and obviously try to keep it long. He's got quite a considerable reach advantage. Obviously, Derek Chisora's reaching at 188 centimetres, and obviously Dillian with 198, so he's got a 3-inch height advantage as well as a 10-inch reach advantage. I think keys for victory for Dillian. I think he'll come out. I think he'll try and keep it long and try and box on the back foot. Obviously, Derek War Chisora has promised, well, it is what it says on the tin, a war. He's going to come in with his George Foreman style, obviously keeping low and try to go to the body early, try to land the overhand right. I think although Dillian will be instructed by Mark Tibbs to keep it long, I think he's going to get sucked into the fight early on and unfortunately play right into Derek's hands. So to confirm, I'm going to go Derek Chisora to win that one and upset the Matchroom apple cart. Okay, moving on to Frank Warren's card. I mean, obviously, headlining here we have Josh Warrington versus Cal Frampton, obviously for the IBF Featherweight Championship. But let's have a look at the undercard. I believe the first televised fight is coming in with Tyson Fury's younger brother, obviously Tommy Fury. For those who haven't seen or heard of Tommy, I believe he's only 20 years old, looks like a bit of a bodybuilder. Apparently he's the only boxer to ever get tested before he even announced he was going professional. So, I mean, obviously he's fighting a journeyman. I believe this guy who he's fighting has had well over 150 losses. And I think he's lost, I think it's about 70 of his last fights. So that obviously that's going to end early. We'll just go Tommy Fury by probably second round knockout. I think he'll probably come out and have a look for the first round. But yeah, fully anticipate Tommy Fury to get off to a flying start on his debut. The next fight is one that I'm very much looking forward to. We've got Nathan Gorman in against Razvan Kajanu. In terms of Nathan Gorman, I personally think that he is one of the better sort of UK prospects and European prospects, in fact, at heavyweight. Obviously stands at 6'3" and has a decent reach as well at 185 centimetres. 22 years old. Obviously the grandson of the gypsy fighter, traveller, if you will, as well. So I mean, looking at his resume, I'm looking now. I mean, obviously his record here is 14-0, 11 knockouts. In terms of victories, yeah, I mean he's stopped 11 out of his 14 wins, stoppage victories over Kamil Sokolovsky, who obviously upset Nick Webb recently. Also a points victory over Dominic Akinladi. I was very impressed, particularly in his last couple of wins. Really, Mohamed Saltby, who beat in Newcastle. I believe he stopped Saltby early. Saltby was going into that fight with a 13-0 record. So on paper, that was a great win. Particularly impressed in Frank Warren's June bill, I believe it was this year, when he knocked out big sexy Sean Turner in probably his most impressive performance to date. Last time out, uninspiring rematch against Kamil Sokolovsky, and obviously that all went all the way through to points. He comes up against Razvan Kajanu, who has a record of 16-4. Obviously Kajanu in his recent fight, was stopped by Luis Ortiz in the first round. Also with a loss to Joseph Parker, who he fought for the WBO title back in 2017. In terms of notable names on his record, looking down, absolutely nobody. To be honest, I think his best win on his record on paper is probably against a Chinese fighter who called Zhu Wu, who I've obviously never ever heard of. So I mean, I'm going to go for Nathan Gorman to win this. Kajanu's now 31, stands at an impressive 6'7", so he's going to have that height advantage and that reach advantage as well, enjoying a 6-inch reach advantage. But I just think Gorman's going to be too rough, too ready, and too keen early doors. I think I'll have a look at Kajanu. I think he may carry some sort of power, but with only 9 knockouts and 16 victories over, albeit modest opposition, I'm going to go for Nathan Gorman to stop Kajanu within the first 4 rounds. Moving on, obviously Mick Conlan versus Jason Cunningham, good domestic dust-up. I don't know a lot about either fighter. It isn't particularly a weight class that I tend to watch. What I do know, obviously Mick Conlan is obviously a prospect going through. He's obviously got that pedigree as well. Jason Cunningham's upset a few fighters over the years. He's got 12 rounds written all over it. So I'm going to go for Mick Conlan to win that on points. Moving on to another fight I'm really looking forward to. Martin Murray versus Hassan Ndam. Both fighters now really on the peripheries of world title shots again. Both well past their best. And obviously Martin Murray has challenged for the world title about 5 or 6 times and obviously come up short on all occasions, albeit he obviously probably won that fight out in Argentina a few years ago. Not like he likes to remind us of that or anything, but I'm going to go for Martin Murray to win that on points. Hassan Ndam's obviously very durable. I think Martin Murray's got a point to prove. Obviously he had his fight against Billy Joe Saunders cancelled twice, and obviously Frank's put him on this bill to give him a bit of a payday. And obviously, he's going to be mandatory for that WBO. So I'm going to go for Martin Murray to grind out a 10-round points victory over Hassan Ndam. Moving on to sort of the main undercard fight, if you will, Mark Heffron versus Liam Williams. This has the potential to be fight of the night. Yet again, I'm going to say it's got points written all over it. I'm going to pick Liam Williams in this fight. I think Liam's obviously a lot more expensive than Mark Heffron. There's been a lot of beef in obviously the lead up to this fight, press conferences and on social media. and the rest of it. I just think Liam Williams is probably